Well, good morning. My name is Scott, and Merry Christmas. And I'm probably the first official person to welcome you to Christmas music listening, gift giving, eggnog drinking, light putting up, tree decorating, merry and bright, most wonderful time of the year. Yeah. This is so exciting. I love Christmas time. This is great. It's great. Some of you just do you need that again? Some of you need that again? All right. Tell your neighbor after we're done. It's wonderful. I love it. And we're kicking off a brand new series, Simply Complicated. There's a lot of complicated things in life, but it's pretty simple a lot of times. And so we're going to dive into it in the next few weeks. Like today, if you found out that your body, your physical body, with all of its intricacies and parts that work together, and I don't even have the smarts to figure out how your cells work, and all the organs work together, and but if you found out that you needed kidney dialysis, and you needed to be there Tuesday at 3, doesn't that simplify things in the whole complicated scheme of how your body works? Or for you and I, for me, whether I had a paper route or job now, here's my budget plan. Don't spend more than I make, right? It's gotten more complicated. There's more pieces involved. For your business, it's the same principle. Don't spend more than you make, right? For our government, it's the same principle. Don't spend more than you make. Refer back to previous message series, all right. But it's the same principle. There's more intricate parts, things that have to work together. It's definitely complicated, right? They're important. We're not saying that things aren't important. But like my wife and I, Amy loves to redo furniture and decorate stuff. And so the other day we saw something in somebody's yard, so we're not afraid to go knock on the door. And so we knock on the door, and there's this dresser around the corner. It's sitting outside. And so we knock, and she gives me the look. She goes, "Don't tell her the whole story, okay? Sometimes you talk too much." I gave her the blank stare look. And I'm like, what? I love the story and things. And so the lady opens the door and she goes, "Hey, would you be mind selling that thing?" And the lady's like, "No, I use it for planting." And then we moved along. But it's simpler, Scott. Don't make it so complicated. Or like this, my boys wanted to buy one of these, so they bought this last Sunday, the Rubik's Cube. Any Rubik's fans? Yes, nerds unite. But the first time ever in my life, I figured out how to solve it. A lot of YouTube videos and some hours later, but I figured out, so if you don't mind giving me a couple of minutes. No, I'm just kidding. So it's real simple, though. All the yellows go on this side, all the blues go on this side, all the whites go on this side, all the greens go on this side, and all the reds go on this side, and oranges go on this side. It's real simple, right? Yeah, right. It's very complicated, but it's simple, and the simplicity cuts through the complicatedness because it brings clarity, right? It brings a focus. You know, this Christmas season, maybe you experienced it at Thanksgiving here, but this Christmas season, some of you have many different family members and parts, and you're like, we got to be here by 11, and then we eat, and then, we got to leave this house in order to make it to that house in time, and you can't be late because then mom gets upset or offended or grandma, or, you got to show up, and, there's just so many different family members, and should we invite them or not, and they were those two are fighting, and it's just there's so many people involved and complicated. But the simplicity of we have friends, we have family, we want to get together because we enjoy each other, right? So there's simplicity involved. Jesus came, and when he showed up on the planet, he said, here's this complicated system of understanding God. He just said, here I am. He was God in human flesh. And that God was kind of hard to understand and figure out. And so God just said, let me make it simple. Here I am. People looked him in the eyes, touched him, experienced life with him. It was pretty simple. And Jesus said, here's this complicated system to understand how you need a Savior. And there's this Old Testament, this old agreement that has a bunch of laws and complicated. And then the Jewish people wrote laws on top of laws so they wouldn't break the laws. And so it was super complicated, a lot of moving pieces and parts. And then Jesus showed up and he said, let me make it real simple. I'm going to make a new agreement with you. I'm going to pay for all of your sins. That's why I showed up. And I'm going to make everybody correct and right with God through me, through Jesus. And he said, here's the deal. All you got to do is love God and love people. It's pretty simple. It's very demanding. It requires a ton of us, but that kind of clarity in the complicated is what we're driving at. And so we're going to talk about the next couple of weeks, love, joy, and peace. And today we'll talk about hope. But love, joy, and peace, peace is pretty complicated. I mean, even between you and another person, there could be a lot of history, a lot of things that's said or not said or done, right? And it's how do we get peace again in a relationship? How do we have peace that lasts, and how do we make this work? And so there's a lot of, but really it just kind of comes down to will you forgive me? I forgive you. And we say we're sorry. You know, how does a war break out and then get resolved? Like two leaders get together, or a group of leaders get together and go, do you quit shooting at us? Yeah. Okay, will you quit shooting at us? Yeah. Like we agree we're going to quit shooting at each other? Yeah. All right, and then we have peace. Right? I mean, there's a clarity there, and I know there's a complicatedness to the everybody below them in a nation setting, like to follow that rule and follow that command, and then restore things and work things out. There's definitely some complicated, but the clarity that a simple agreement, and so we'll talk about all these, and today we're going to talk about hope, because I love hope. Because there's a thrill involved with hope, right? There is a thrill when you think things are going to get better. Like we just sang it in the song that the world was tired, it was weary, and then there's this thrill of hope, like things are going to be made right. Like if you're a baseball fan and it's the bottom of the ninth and the game is tied and a guy gets on second, right? Come on, baseball fans, you know what I'm talking about? There's like a thrill. There's a thrill like we are going to win this game. Or when Russell Wilson has the ball, right? And there's 1 minute and 45 seconds left, and you're like Jimmy Graham down the seam, like this is going to work. And then Hauschka goes to all right, we won't talk about that. All right, so I don't know. I mean, money Hauschka, just what? We got hope though in Hauschka. All right. I can easily distract myself. But there is a thrill when you think there's no way out, there's no good resolution here, there's no good outcome, and then something happens. And there's hope infused, injected, introduced in the situation, in the circumstance, and you're like, there's hope. And there's a thrill that instantly shows up. And because I think we all want hope in life. And what gives us hope? And why do we lose hope? And what restores our hope? And these are some questions I think we all wrestle with at time and here and there. But today I just kind of want to wrestle with these. You know, I think you want hope. And what gives you hope? And why do you lose hope? And what restores your hope? These are some big picture questions, some big life questions, and I don't pretend to have all the answers to and to know your situation and specifically what you've gone through or what you're dealing with, why you've lost hope or what gives you hope exactly or what's restored your hope or what are you looking to or the person you're looking for to restore your hope. I don't pretend to know everything that's going on, but I do know that when Jesus came, and obviously Christmas time we celebrate Christ coming on earth and to give us hope, that he recognized we all needed hope. He recognized that he is hope, and he's the hope of the world, and that we've lost our hope as a world, and so he showed up and he restored our hope. And so I think, personally, Jesus is the answer for everything. And whatever you're going through, whatever circumstance you find yourself, whatever stage of life you're in, that you want hope, but then Jesus is the answer to give you hope, to help you to restore your hope. And it said this about Jesus long ago, hundreds of years before he showed up in Matthew 12. It's quoted for us that Isaiah said, and his name of Jesus, will be the hope of all the world. That the world needs hope, and you and I need hope, and his name, Jesus, is hope. He is hope, and his name will be the hope for every single person. And then Paul, who is a follower of Christ after many years of not following Christ, he writes this in another letter, and he echoes the same thing. He says his name is hope. He's the God of hope. And he writes this letter to some people who needed hope. And so maybe this is for you today, and it's definitely for me today. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. Isn't that interesting? Just the hope and the joy and the peace and how they're tied together. That's why we're putting all these together for the next few weeks. The God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him. Where do I find my hope? Man, I've put my hope in myself before. But Jesus invites us to put our hope in him. That as we trust in him, as you trust in God, that he'll fill you with all joy and peace. So much much hope, so much joy, so much peace in your life if you trust in God, that you'll overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit at work in your life. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that encouraging? It's super good. We're going to come back to that after we look at this story. If you're following along, you follow along in the message notes there on our app, but we're going to be in John chapter 11, and we're going to do this whole story. It's Lazarus, the story of Lazarus, and many of you have heard this story, familiar with the story. Even if you're not a church person, maybe this is your very first time here, but you're familiar with there's a guy who died and Jesus raised him to life. So spoiler alert on that one. But John 11 is where we're going, so if you want to follow along, we're going to go through all these verses, so hopefully we'll move kind of fairly fast through some of these. So a man named Lazarus was sick, definitely ill, very ill, like deathly ill. He lived in Bethany with his sisters Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. So we got a family here. Someone's like deathly ill. So the two sisters sent a message to Jesus. They sent this message. They were in a desperate spot. Like, brother is on the verge of death message. So an urgent message. And they sent it to the one they had their hope in, because he was the only option they had. And here's the message. Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Like my reading of this, like, Lord, your very best friend, like if you're busy with other people and other things, like consider who your BFF is. So you might want to like abandon that whole track and come on over here because he's very sick. Like they're leaning in on the relationship. So it's not just a stranger, I hope they respond, but it's like they're very good friend. And Jesus is like, hey, you're able to help. He's your good friend, like very sick, come on over. But when Jesus got this message, right? He said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. And I'm sure people around Jesus, when he said this, were like, what? What are you talking about? And so it goes on here. So although Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, because you can, and maybe you'll experience this today, but you can read this story, you can hear this story, and you go, I don't know how Jesus actually loved that person. And you can find out more here in the story, but you could begin to question Jesus' love for not only his friends, but like for people as you see how Jesus responded. Because he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Like, I'm not always the best at getting back to people when they call me or email me or text me, and people, some people have known that. But like, if you say you're dying and I have the aspirin that's going to save your life, like I'm going to come right over. And here Jesus is hanging out for 2 more days. So although he loved them. And so after a couple days, finally he said to the disciples, all right, let's go back to Judea, this place they'd been before. But his disciples objected, saying, Rabbi or teacher, only a few days ago, remember the people over there? Yeah, Judea? They were trying to stone you. Are you really going to go again? Like, here's Jesus' followers going, if we go over there, we're going to die. If we go over there, we have no hope of living. Like, if we go over there, they're going to kill you and they're going to kill anybody else who's following you, a.k.a. me. And I don't really want to die today. Like, their hope is going out the window as Jesus says, let's go back to the place where they're dying. So their thrill is at low. Like, it's at 0. It's gone. There's no thrill of hope here. There's the thrill of death coming their way. But Jesus replied, and I love Jesus for this, because it's always like you throw out something big, he throws you like a weird question. Or you throw something big picture, question, he throws you like a weird story. You're like, what in the world? He says this, Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. Wait, time out. Weren't we just talking about dying and getting stoned? Like, how does this relate? During the day, people can walk safely. Okay, how does this get back to us not dying? All right, they can see because they have the light of this world. And then he goes on. And he says, but at night there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Awesome. Are we still dying? Are we still getting stoned? Should we go at nighttime? Is that what you're saying? What are you saying here? I'm not sure. I'm not picking up what you're putting down. And Jesus just is getting to him. Like, he's trying to reveal who he is to his disciples. He's always trying to reveal to his followers who he is. And we'll see later in the story he does that again. And with you and I and in your life and my life, he's always trying to reveal himself. And sometimes we're over here and distracted. And maybe it's our circumstance or our situation and your lack of hope and there's despair and you're really focused in on the circumstance and what's going on and you can't see anything. And Jesus tries to broaden our perspective. He's going, you don't quite get what's going on. And then he addresses the issue again. He said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I'll go and wake him up. And his disciples rejoiced because the thrill of hope had been injected back into the situation. They said this to him. They go, all right, Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll get better soon. Yes. Right? We don't have to go over there and get stoned. Because they think he's really talking about sleeping and not dying. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. But here's the disciples like zoned in on what they're thinking. And they're thinking, yeah, if we don't have to go over there, let's don't go over there. NyQuil him up and then let him sleep it off. Like emergency, like whatever he needs, multivitamin, like he's good. Let him sleep and we'll be safe over here. But he told them plainly, Jesus goes on, all right, he gets it. They're not figuring it out. Lazarus is dead. Okay, that's clear. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For, not good for Lazarus, obviously, but for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. So here's Thomas, one of the disciples who's, in this crowd, and goes, all right, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, all right, I'm in. Let's go to and die with Jesus. Right? If you know Jesus' story, Thomas is the one that after Jesus rises, he, doesn't believe until he sees. And so we kind of nickname him the doubter, Thomas the doubter. And you've kind of that's a saying in our culture. But here he is, right? Thomas the faithful, Thomas the courageous, Thomas the believer, Thomas the disciple, Thomas the follower, Thomas the true follower, Thomas the gonna go die with you follower, right? I'm trying to give Thomas a better rap for us, But here he is as a Jesus follower going, I'm going to follow Jesus regardless, even if it means the dude we thought was sleeping, but he's actually dead. Okay, get that. That's kind of sad and important. I'm going to go over to that town where there's a bunch of angry people who are on the lookout, and as soon as Jesus' face is seen in the town, the whole mob comes out, and they're going to stone you, and they're going to stone us. Let's go. Where's the thrill of hope in that, right? You look at it at a surface level, where's the hope that Thomas has? The hope is Thomas knows who he's following. Where does Thomas get his hope from? From following Jesus. And he's probably been in a few hairy situations with Jesus where it's storm in a boat and the calm's the sea and no food and people and the other dead people. And he's like, I don't know, but I guess we're dying right here. And later Thomas does die for his faith, all the followers do in following Jesus, but not in this moment, as we'll find out. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in the grave for 4 days. And this is significant because, Jesus had stayed 2 days, so if you're keeping track of the math here, is the messenger was sent probably on the day that Lazarus died, because he was sent when he was ill, right? That was the message. And so he probably dies on that day. And then Jesus stays 2 more days and then travels on the 4th day. And that's significant, as we'll find out here, because Jewish people didn't really believe you were dead until the 4th day, till the end of the 3rd day, because during the first couple of days, they believed the soul would come and visit the body and see if it could get reconnected and come alive again or something. They didn't quite believe you were dead. And so there was this waiting period before they really believed you were dead, and then for body decomposition. So Jesus intentionally waited those couple of days so that people knew that Lazarus was dead. He wasn't partially dead. Does that make sense? You with me? All right. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem. Jesus wasn't too far. And many of the people had come to console with Martha and Mary in their loss. As you can imagine, right? Time of loss, there's all this, grieving and people surrounding you. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary stayed in the house. And so Martha runs out to where Jesus was, and because Jesus had hung outside. So Martha said to Jesus, he had hung outside the town, Jesus, Lord, if only. You ever use that phrase? I've used that phrase. Especially in a hopeless situation. If only I'd listened to my dad, If only I'd done the, wise choice last week. If only I'd been more responsible in my 20s. If only I'd been more responsible in my 20s and 30s. If only I'd been listening to that person who gave me different career advice. If only I'd said I was sorry in that relationship. If only, and there's this sense of hopelessness, this sense of regret that follows those words, that surrounds that emotion. And here's Martha saying to Jesus, Lord, Jesus is their good friend. And it's if only. And you could she's been crying and wailing and moaning and weeping for days. She's just tired. You've been there, right? Where you just feel worn out. And she's just ragged, and she's at the end, and she's just been, and he's dead now. It's been 4 days, and there's no coming back from this. And if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. She's just lamenting. I don't know if she's rebuking Jesus. I just think she's just sad. And she just has put her hope in Jesus and been following him and said, if only you would come through, God. You and I have done. If only, God, you'd answer my prayer. If only you'd done what I asked you to do, then it wouldn't be in this situation. And here she is, just as this at his feet, probably, just right before him. But then she has this statement of faith and hope. I read it as hope, but even now, God, Lord Jesus, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Like, she just still has her hope in Jesus. She has an if only statement, but then she has a I still believe in you statement. And she has this statement of experience as she has witnessed and seen Jesus ask the Father for many things, and he comes through. That she's heard Jesus tell stories and taught with authority and done miracles. And she says, I know right now that if you ask the Father, ask God, he will give you whatever you ask. And I think it's really interesting, intriguing, and challenging for me personally that she didn't say, and my brother would to live, my brother to live again, that my brother wouldn't die. That she just kind of like puts this blanket full hope in Jesus. Like, God, whatever you want to ask God for, he'll do. I know that. I usually say, I know, Jesus, that if whatever you want to do, you can do. So here's what you want to do. And I fill in the blank for him. Do you fill in the blank for Jesus? You're like, here's what you need to do, Jesus. I know you can do anything, so here's what you need to do. My brother's dead. He needs to come back to life. We're all real sad around here. I think it's real interesting when you talk about having a thrill of hope, like Thomas did, like Martha did, where they just go with Jesus. Thomas is like, we're going to go die, but I still got hope in Jesus. Martha's like, you can do anything, and God will answer any request you have, and whatever you want to do, I'm open to, because you're going to be Lord. That's how she starts her statement. Like, you're going to be in charge. You're going to be the one that I surrender my life to, so I'm going to go with you and be okay with whatever you're doing. Like, there's a hope there. That is a deep, eternal, long-lasting hope that overrides circumstances and situations that goes beyond anything that we can really grasp. As you put your hope in Jesus, he will be the hope of all the nations. And this is why. Because Jesus says, well, your brother will rise again. And you would think, oh, yeah, this is the point where the hope gets interjected back in the situation. Like, cue the fun music in the background, right? And then, like, in the Hallmark movies, cue snow. Snow is falling now. They're going to kiss. Like, it's going to happen. They're getting back together. Like, here's the moment. Your brother will rise again. And this is just my interpretation, right, is how I read the story. And here's Martha going, whatever. She says yes, but she's like, whatever. Yeah, he'll rise when everyone else rises at the last day. Like, yes, she was a person who believed in the resurrection. Many people didn't. And like in our society today, I believe there's a resurrection of people when Jesus returns. And so she's like, yeah, later, like long down the road, like years from now. But there's a sadness that's going to exist in my heart between now and when he rises. And I know there's an eternal hope, and I know there's a long-lasting hope, but there's a sadness that will exist as our time apart, as our separated, right? As you've lost family members and I've lost family members to death, and like as a Christ follower, I don't mourn as a person without hope. I mourn as a person with hope. But there's still a sadness that resides in my heart as separated. My mom just reminded me, thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom. My mom reminded me 2 years ago this morning, my uncle was out of town and had visited for Thanksgiving, and he came and shared his story during our Love Does kickoff. And so I was having to be speaking, and he shared his story of going through cancer and battling, and he finally went to be with Jesus last year. And so, I get what it means to have separation. So here's Martha going, yeah, later. Like, what about today? Like, I'm sad today. Like, what about the hope today? Like, she gets the hope for later, and the hope carries her for that each and every day. But what about today? And so here's Jesus, again, trying to reveal who he is to her. She's over here kind of just with a narrow view of Jesus. Although she's an all-in follower of Jesus, it's still not a perfect understanding of who Christ is. So Jesus told her, no, you don't get it. I am the resurrection and the life. Like, Jesus going, no, you don't even know who you're talking to. I'm the source of the resurrection. Like, he will rise because you're talking to life itself, like the source of life, God in human flesh, right? God is the source of life. He's going, you don't quite understand who you're talking to. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. And everyone who listens or who lives in me, he goes on to say, everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. That's hope, huh? That's awesome. That's exciting. Do you believe this, Martha? I mean, do you believe this? It's one of those moments when somebody passes away and then you have to explain it to a 5-year-old, right? We have a 5-year-old and 7-year-old, 10-year-old, and you have to pass great-Grammy dying, great-grandpa dying, Uncle Dale dying, and what does that mean? And will we see them again? And when, for me personally, when I have to go, let's talk about death and dying and how this works with a 5-year-old, with a 7-year-old. It's a complicated thing. There's a lot of pieces, and you're like, you want to learn about the old agreement? It's like there's so many different things going on, and we start back at the beginning. And my tendency is to tell the whole story. It's like, let's back to the beginning. Before God, there's man. It's like, what in the world? But if you just go, listen, you believe in Jesus, you'll never die again. Why? Because he is the life and the resurrection. There's a lot of complicated things. It's a lot of stuff we should dive into and talk about and discuss and grow in, and you should build your faith. But it comes down to simply that if you believe in Jesus, you will never die again because he is the life and he is the resurrection. Do you believe this? If you're not a Jesus follower, this is what Jesus offers to you. He doesn't offer a set of rules and regulations, and you got to have your butt in a pew on a Sunday morning and follow the 10 Commandments and more so, and whatever somebody in your life told you in the past is like, this is how you get right with God, and you better do these things, you better don't do these things. This is what Jesus offers you, is life and resurrection. That if you believe in him, you will never, ever die. Do you believe this? And all he asks is for you to follow him, to believe in him and then to follow. And you don't have to be perfect at it. And you can be like Thomas all the time and be like, well, here we go again to die. But I'm going to follow Jesus because that's where my hope is. And what steals my hope is when I start to hope in myself. What renews my hope? When I begin to put my hope back in Jesus and trust in him. Then the God of hope puts all love and joy and peace in my heart, so much so that it overflows. So here's Martha in this moment. And she says, yes, Lord. She told him, I've always believed you are the Messiah, the promised one, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. So then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher is here and he wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. And Jesus stayed outside the village, probably because he didn't want to get stoned to death. Thomas is like, yes, at the place where Martha met him. When the people were there at the house, consoling Mary, saw her leave so hastily. They assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep, right? They've probably been doing this for a couple days, going back and forth and weeping and wailing and moaning and grieving, right? So they followed her out there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only. I think the sisters have been talking for a few days. If only he had showed up. Day 1, day 2. Where is he? Is he going to come? If only you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger, a righteous anger welled up within him. I don't know if you picture Jesus ever angry, but here's a deep anger. And he was deeply troubled or deeply agitated or deeply just disturbed from the inside, just like turning on the inside. And as I read this story, I think he's angry at death. Because death is a thing. It's a force. It's not just something that happens. It's a thing. You read Revelation, death gets thrown into the lake of fire. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It actually gets thrown into a lake of fire. So it's a thing. And I think Jesus is so just ticked off and agitated at the cause and effect of what happens. That people die and then all of this happens. All the wailing, the moaning, and the destruction. It's not the way it was meant to be. And so here's Jesus just like, it's just rising up. And he's just got this deep agitation. So he goes, where have you put him? Let's take care of this. Like he's like, I'm here to do this. This is why he came. He's the life and the resurrection, right? So they said, okay, come and see. And Jesus wept. And Jesus sheds a tear. He's crying. He's not wailing and moaning like they are. It's a different kind of emotion there. And why he's doing that, he sees what's happening and it's affecting him. He's fully God, he's fully man. He does it for the benefit of other people. Because then the people who were standing there, they saw Jesus and they said, go to the next verse here. They saw Jesus and they said, see how much he loved him? They can see how much he cares for his friend. But some said, as they're walking, right, some chatter, some Twitter chatter, some news channel cycle chatter going on, like, right? But isn't this the guy who healed the blind man? Right? I don't know if they're surfer dudes, but I would be. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? We watched Finding Dory, so sorry. The EAC. But they're just they're just not believers. They're just these people that are grieving with them. They're going, "What? This is the guy? Couldn't he have kept him? Like, I don't believe in Jesus." As they're walking to go see what happens, so Jesus was still very angry, still just agitated, still just ticked off at death, because death is a punk. I hate it too. It's ridiculous. They arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across. Sound familiar? Roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sisters, protested. Lord, do you have junior hires? If their door's closed, it has been for days. Like, you do not crack that door open. You'll get a funk coming out of there of just, flatulence and stinky clothes and sports gear. I mean, it's bad. It's been a few hours. We don't even have junior hires yet, but open the boys' door and it's like, woo! What do you guys got under the bed there? It's ridiculous. But she says, he's been dead for 4 days. 4 days means he's dead. 4 days means his body is decomposing. There's flesh that is rotting. It's going to be rancid. It's not pretty. Not roadkill a couple hours ago. 4 days dead. The smell will be terrible. And so here's this group of people, and this stone, and Jesus in this moment of okay, something's going to happen. You want your brother back to life, he'll rise. Do you understand? She's probably not quite getting it, but you're looking for me she's looking for Jesus to make something happen in her situation, and she's discounting Jesus. Even though she's a believer, she's believed from the beginning, he's Messiah, but still she's not fully in on what Jesus is up to. And you may feel the same about a situation in your life. You may think it's 4 days and the smell's dead, terrible because it's dead. You may be saying, yeah, but I've already filed bankruptcy. And that was years ago. How would Jesus restore that? We've already divorced. We've signed papers. It's dead, Scott. It's 4 days more than 4 days old, and the smell is terrible. I've already, we've already agreed and signed and gone our separate ways. I've already gone to the workplace and asked, and it's just no, and the governing body at work, whether it's the supervisor or the owner or whatever, says no, and I've asked and I've tried to bend different ways. It's it's no, it's gone and dead. You're saying, my kid, I tried to get him to follow Christ, but they've just grown up and just wandered. They've wandered a long ways. They're way out here and don't know how to come back, and it's gone. There's no hope. Dead. Whatever you got going on in your life, or the relationship, you're I've got this physical thing. Let's say you had a surgery. They told me it would be better after the surgery, and it's not. It's not where it was. They said they would be fixed. It's not. It's dead. And Jesus would say to you, he's the life and the resurrection. Do you believe in him? Where are you placing your hope? 4 days, 40 days, 4 years. Who else are you going to turn to? Where else are you going to go? I've tried putting hope in myself. Sometimes it works a little bit in the beginning. Most of the time it doesn't work at all. But long term, it never works. Jesus says, put your trust in him. But it's dead. But watch, wait, here we go. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you? Didn't you remember at the beginning? This is not going to end in death. Lazarus' sickness is not going to end in death. And you know why? Because you would see God's glory if you believe. He's looking around. Wait a minute. Come on now. Didn't I tell you this? So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. He's going, you don't believe in me yet? Let me just show you something. Then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. Should maybe read the live man came out. I don't know how you were the once dead man came out. His hands and feet bound in grave cloths, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Release him from the bondage of death. Jesus says, I am the life and the resurrection. You think death can hold? You think some bond, some sheet or some wrapping around this guy's going to hold him? No, roll that stone away. Death is a punk and has got his butt kicked today. And then many of the people who were with Mary and Martha and then all the followers that are around believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. Wouldn't you? I would. They're like, I don't know if that guy, we're going to get stoned later today, but I'm with him. I'm going with him. Because where else are you going to put your hope? Put your hope in Jesus, and there's always a thrill of hope. There's always an expectation of life is going to get better. Because Jesus makes life better and makes you better at life. Like he came to give us life and life to the fullest. And this is what it means to follow Jesus, that whatever the circumstance, whatever situation, whatever you think is dead and gone and there's no hope, man, let Jesus inject some thrill of hope into your life today. Because it can't be complicated for this series. It can't be complicated. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of moving pieces for the orchestration to happen at your workplace because it involves other companies and organizations or whatever. But here's the simple thing. You put your hope in Jesus when life gets complicated. And that's just the big takeaway today. When life gets complicated, hope in Jesus. Without disregarding the issues and the situation, the circumstances. But man, dude was dead in the cave, in the tomb for 4 days. Put your hope in Jesus. When you think there's no hope, there's no end, there's just not going to work out, put your hope in Jesus. Trust in Jesus. And then you know what happens in the moment, in the situation, in the circumstances, each and every day as you go about your day? The God of hope fills you with lots and lots of hope, lots and lots of joy, lots and lots of peace and love. So much so that you're overflowing. And that today, my challenge for each and every one of us is to put your hope in Jesus. And as he does, it overflows. And you know what you do with overflowing stuff? I don't know about you, but at me, when Thanksgiving's happening and you're serving stuff and something kind of gets on the edge of the bowl, you're like, oh, that's good. I use my finger and lick it up. You know what I mean? I know some of you just got grossed out. But there's when it overflows, you don't want to waste it, right? I mean, if it's really good, you don't want to waste it. And so in this next verse, I love this next verse that Paul is writing. He's full of hope. And he's writing to people who need hope. And he says this. He says, I am fully convinced. I'm believing in you, Gary. I believe in you, And he's just going to people that he's writing to and going, I'm convinced about you. I got a belief in you, my brothers and sisters. This is the very next verse, that you yourselves are full of goodness. I mean, apparently they needed to hear they're full of goodness, that group of people. And you're filled with knowledge and competent to instruct one another. They were floundering in what God had given them and what Paul set them off, and they were kind of not believing that they could do it. And Paul's like, no, I believe in you. I'm confident. I got so much hope and joy and peace that it's overflowing. And so hopefully you got a card on the way in. If you didn't get one of these blank cards, okay, two things. One, they're cool and fun and festive, all right? But they're blank, and you get an envelope. And today, hopefully, you take two things away. One, just that you would be full of hope, and there would be thrill in your life and for whatever you're going through. And then two, I just know that as you put your trust in Jesus and hope in him, you got to have overflowing. And there's somebody in your life that needs a letter from you that sounds something like this. I don't know who it is. I don't know what they need to hear, but you do, and God does. So work together and take this blank card. And maybe it's somebody that's, they're just not expecting it from you. They're just not sure it would ever come from you, or just it would almost seem random to them. But somebody that you just need to pour, there's overflowing hope. You got extra. So take some of that extra and just write it down and send it to them.